Have you ever heard that stories are the most powerful way to share ideas? Studies show that stories are 22 times more memorable than just facts alone. That's a staggering number. When we hear a story, our brains light up like fireworks, making connections that help us remember long after the tale ends. But here's the kicker: 85% of people struggle to tell a story effectively. Why? Many think storytelling is all about complex plots and elaborate details. The truth is, the best stories are often the simplest ones. Think about your favorite movie or book. It likely had a clear message and relatable characters. Simplicity can create powerful emotions and connections. In this article, we'll explore how you can harness the hidden power of simplicity in storytelling. You'll learn about the art of crafting simple narratives, the magic of pauses, and the importance of focusing on a core message. We'll also discuss how to build memorable characters and leave room for interpretation. So, are you ready to unlock the secrets of effective storytelling? Let's dive in and discover how simplicity can elevate your stories to new heights. Chapter 1: The Art of Crafting a Simple Narrative, Without Losing Depth. The idea that complexity equals brilliance is a myth. The best stories are often the simplest. Think of The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. It's a children's book, yet its core themes of love, loss, and human nature are incredibly profound. The key: simplicity. Crafting a simple narrative doesn't mean watering down your story. It means getting straight to the heart of the matter. Every story has a core idea, a message, or a feeling it wants to convey. The trick is focusing on that without getting lost in unnecessary details. Take Pixar's storytelling formula, for example. Their famous 22 rules of storytelling emphasize the importance of clarity. They suggest starting with this basic structure: once upon a time, every day, until one day. It's simple, but it leaves room to build depth without confusing the audience. Here's another interesting fact. In a study by Harvard Business Review, people remember stories that are emotionally charged and easy to follow 22 times more than just data or complex information. It shows that the more digestible your story is, the more it sticks with your audience. A great strategy to keep in mind is to focus on your story's emotional arc. Think about how each moment contributes to that arc. Anything that doesn't, cut it. It's all about maintaining clarity while adding layers of emotion. It's how you create stories that hit hard without being complicated. Chapter 2: The Power of Pauses. Mastering timing in your story. Pauses are a storyteller's best kept secret. Used right, they can completely change the rhythm of your narrative. Think about Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. His pauses made the words resonate deeply. He knew when to let the audience sit with the message before moving on. In storytelling, timing is everything. Pauses give your audience time to breathe, reflect, and absorb what you've said. This idea comes straight from classical theater and has been used by great speakers and performers throughout history. The dramatic pause lets tension build naturally. There's research behind this too. According to Dr. Nick Morgan, a communications expert, effective pauses in speeches and stories can increase listener retention by 30%. When there's too much information coming at once, people tend to tune out. Pauses let the mind catch up, making it easier to remember the most important parts. So, how can you use pauses in your storytelling? Try using a pause right after a major plot twist or emotional moment. This lets the audience feel the weight of what's happening. Also, vary the speed of your delivery. If everything is delivered at the same pace, your audience might get lost in the rhythm. But when you break it up with pauses, it creates contrast and keeps the listener engaged. It's also important to remember that not every second of a story needs words. Sometimes, silence can say more than 100 sentences. Chapter 3: Show, Don't Tell. How minimal details spark imagination. Show, don't tell, is advice every storyteller hears. But not enough people know how to make it work in their favor. The trick: using fewer details to spark your audience's imagination. It's what makes stories come alive in their minds. Here's a fascinating fact. Studies show that 80% of people are visual learners. This means they process images better than words. So, when you show your story rather than tell it, you're giving them the chance to create mental images. That's why saying, "her hands trembled," is far more powerful than saying, "she was scared." You're letting the audience experience the emotion rather than just hear about it. In Ernest Hemingway's famous six-word story, For Sale, Baby Shoes, Never Worn, he paints a vivid, heart-wrenching picture with barely any words. This is a perfect example of how you don't need to overwhelm your audience with description. By keeping it simple, you let them fill in the gaps with their imagination. Another powerful technique is to use sensory details sparingly. Instead of describing every single thing in a room, focus on just one or two striking details. For example, instead of writing, "the room was cluttered with books, papers, and old furniture," you could say, "dust clung to a single forgotten book on the shelf." This small detail is enough to set the scene, and it allows the audience to build the rest of the image on their own. In a way, showing instead of telling respects your audience's intelligence. You're trusting them to connect the dots, making the experience far more engaging for them. It's all about suggesting rather than explaining. If you're enjoying these storytelling tips, don't forget to subscribe for more insights. Let's keep exploring the art of storytelling together. Chapter 4, The Emotional Core, Finding One Message and Sticking to It. Every great story has a core message or emotion that drives it. It might be about love, loss, hope, or resilience, but the point is to keep it focused. The simpler the message, the stronger the impact. A great example of this is The Shawshank Redemption. The entire movie revolves around one core theme, hope. All the subplots, dialogue, and characters reinforce that central emotion. If the story tried to explore too many ideas at once, it would have lost its emotional punch. In fact, research from Princeton University shows that when a story has a singular, clear theme, people are more likely to remember it and even share it with others. This is because the brain is wired to respond to stories that have a focused emotional message. It's like music. A symphony with too many notes all at once can feel chaotic. But a melody with a clear, central theme sticks in your head. So how do you keep your story on track? Start by identifying the main emotion you want your audience to feel. Then, make sure everything in your story points back to that emotion. Ask yourself with each scene or detail, does this reinforce the emotional core? Another useful tip, if you're unsure of the message, boil your story down to one sentence. If you can't summarize it that simply, your story might be too cluttered. As Mark Twain famously said, "If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter." Simplicity takes effort, but it's worth it. Chapter 5, Building Memorable Characters with Just a Few Traits. Think of the most memorable characters in movies or books. They usually have just a few defining traits. That's because you don't need to give your audience an overload of details to make a character feel real. Take Sherlock Holmes. He's brilliant, eccentric, and emotionally detached. Those few traits are enough to make him iconic. We don't need an in-depth backstory for him to feel real. The simplicity of his character traits allows his actions to speak for him. Research from cognitive science shows that people can only hold about 3-5 pieces of information in their working memory at any time. So, when you load your characters with too many traits, quirks, or backgrounds, it overwhelms the audience. They start forgetting who's who, or worse, they stop caring about the characters altogether. A great technique is to focus on a character's core motivations or values. What drives them? What do they fear or desire? Once you know that, you can strip away unnecessary details. Keep it clean and focused. For example, Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games is defined by her fierce loyalty and survival instinct. That's it. And yet, she feels complex because those core traits shape everything she does. You can also use contrast to make characters memorable. When a character has opposing traits, like being both tough and vulnerable, it creates intrigue. It's simple but powerful because the audience can relate to those contradictions. If you found these tips valuable, make sure to subscribe for more storytelling insights. Let's continue to explore how to craft compelling narratives that resonate.